welcome to the show, Nishant. Good to have you.
Thank you, Anish. It's wonderful. In fact, I've been following these podcasts for a few weeks now,
Thank you.
and I think the kind of guests you also getting on the show is lovely. I mean, I've learned a lot. Hopefully, this session makes other people learn something about.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. So, for all of you who may not know, Nishant has just got his iPhone 14 Pro Max, and he was also at the Apple Spaceship Campus last week during launch.
Yeah.
How many times have you been there?
Excuse me. This was, I think, my sixth time. So I've been going there since the very first time they actually inaugurated Steve Jobs Theatre to the whole world. And it was the first year when the Spaceship Campus was unveiled as well to the employees, and even the employees had not moved in yet because it was going to happen in phases. I mean, they have such a large workforce.
Nice. And how is it to be at an Apple keynote in all its glory, not online?
It's a vibe. I mean, I'm too old to be saying this, but it's a vibe because from the moment you sit in the shuttle bus that actually ferries you from your hotel to the Apple Spaceship Campus, the bus driver is excited and enthusiastic. You get off the main gates of the Spaceship Campus. There are greeters at every few feet giving you high fives and welcoming you. So the entire atmosphere is filled with genuine joy and enthusiasm. You feel like you're going for a collective event. And of course, when somebody like Tim Cook walks up on stage, it is an event. I mean, I think he gets a rock star welcome, which very few corporate CEOs or tech CEOs can boast of. So it's like I said, it's a vibe just being there. And everybody, either fanboy or not, is in the moment because I think the one thing we both agree on is, how Apple safeguards its secrecy and the new product lineup. So although there are rumors all over the interweb about what the new phone, new watch, new AirPods are going to look like, nobody really knows for sure until you see it on stage. Yeah. And that, after all these years, it's something that still amazes me. And that is the reason for the joy and enthusiasm that you see on everybody's face in the campus, be it employees, be it staffers, be it greeters, and the press. Yeah. Everybody's excited to see something that they've never seen before.
The one more thing.
Yeah, the one more thing.
I think speaking of Apple keynotes, that iconic keynote when Steve Jobs said, launched the iPhone and said it's a phone, it's a communicator, it's a music player. But a few days before there was an interview and they're like, is Apple going to launch a phone? And he made it sound like that's the most ridiculous
hilarious thing. Yeah.
Why would Apple ever do that? So yeah, Apple, of course, is super, super secret. Great, man. 6 times. Amazing. Jumping right into it, I think when this episode goes live, India would have had about 4 or 5 days of their iPhone launch.
Yeah.
So I think the idea here is to decode and understand the basic major updates to iPhone 14. Now the new device, the 14 Plus, 14 Pro, Pro Max, and if it makes sense for people to upgrade, when to upgrade and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. So I think it was quite a colorful lineup this time, I mean, both figuratively and literally as well. 14 Plus, I think, is a very interesting category, and I think it's been born out of purely a business decision by Apple because, of course, people want large-size phones to compete both with the Android ecosystem, and also I think people's penchant for having larger screens because so many people, with the whole work-from-home culture or just being active all the time and being at work all the time, people just want bigger screens to be more productive. So I think Plus is purely a business call. What I think personally they should have not axed is the Mini because even the 13 Mini, I think it's going to be, of course, sold out soon because they are just selling whatever stocks are left in the stores right now. That is going to become a cult item very soon because it had all the horsepower of the Pro level devices, similar kind of a chip, with a form factor that I think a lot of us still love. And I think human hands are designed for the Mini ideally, which is what Steve Jobs' original vision was, that you should be able to reach the edge from the top left edge to the bottom right edge with only one thumb. And the only iPhone you can do that right now is the Mini, which sadly has been discontinued now. So I think that is going to be something that's sorely missed by a lot of fanboys. Apart from that, I think the 14 Plus is a great business call. It's going to sell like hotcakes. Although, if I am to believe, and what I've read is true, it's been lagging behind on sales forecasts. So I don't know what's going to happen eventually down the. It's too early to say. It's very early days for the 14 Plus. It's an all-new category even for Apple. But apart from that, I think the upgrades are all incremental, and I think it's again Apple doing what it does best. So they look similar to the 13 and even the 12 series that came before that. So it's almost a 3-year-old design now. And it's a classic case of why fix it if it ain't broke. And it's a great design. In fact, just before recording, we were talking about appreciating how great the form factor is, and the build quality is outstanding. You can't take that away from Apple, and so I think they just keep chipping away at the rough edges and making it more refined as an experience, both hardware and software. So the biggest upgrades are under the hood. I think for the 14, in fact, there's nothing that even visually differentiates it from the 13 series. Of course, the camera sensor is new. There's a better true depth camera, so you have better selfie camera now. Low light performance has apparently improved tremendously. So I've only had the phone about a day now, the Pro Max. So even I have not run it through its paces. But if you had to believe the marketing spiel, there has been a huge upgrade on the camera front. And yes, I mean there are certain things for safety, like the emergency SOS feature, which is great because you can actually connect directly to a satellite. So again, in terms of pure engineering prowess, this is Apple flexing it. That we can actually build satellite level antennas within the form factor of such a beautiful device. And of course, I mean, for people who don't usually go on treks or outdoor activities, it might seem frivolous, but I think in the US, where I think it's going to start rolling out first from, it's a big deal because I mean, people do have a very active outdoor lifestyle, and you are for very prolonged periods of time away from a cellular network or a base. So for them, I think satellite is a pretty big deal. In India, I think it's not even active right now. It may be eventually. It all depends on regulatory approvals. But until that happens, I think for us it might just be a fringe feature that nobody really cares about.
When the invite came out with the far out thing, and for those who are not Apple fanboys or really following the Apple ecosystem, every time Apple puts out an invite, it always gets decoded, and then there are conspiracy theories about what can be and stuff, right? When the far out, like this event's invite said far out, and there were stars, this whole speculation of astrophotography came up, periscope, zoom came up, and then there was some speculation on satellite connectivity, and I think most people negated that, saying a phone is like this is not going to have
exactly. I mean, you wouldn't have believed, and this is something that Apple does so well. This they shock and awe in ways that you never expect or anticipate. So I think that was really a shocker that you can do this. Like I said, the full gravity of it might not be appreciated by most of us because, well, God forbid, nobody wants to be in a situation where you have to make a satellite call or a satellite message. But if you do, I think it's a great thing. The same thing with the new emergency SOS systems, where it has crash detection. Again, it sounds far out, but it has some incredibly powerful and sophisticated sensors that can actually sense up to 256 Gs, which is beyond, I think, my comprehension. I don't know whether it's beyond human comprehension, because I think even a roller coaster or a Formula One car at its most extreme corner does 3 or 4 Gs. So 250 Gs is quite a lot, but it has a gyroscope and an accelerometer that can monitor that kind of G-force and instantly, tell whether you've been in a car crash and alert your emergency contacts or even emergency services. So again, that will work in India, again, depending on regulatory approvals. So all these things are exciting. I think they really push the bar forward in terms of what a phone can do in terms of safety assistance. But in India, in the Indian context, they are still largely irrelevant.
But these features are on all the new 14 devices, right? Whether Pro or Pro Max.
Yes, on both the ranges, the regular 14 and the Pros.
And the crash detection is also on the new Apple Watch.
On the Apple Watch as well, yes. So it works in, you can use independently, or it works in unison as well. So if you're wearing both the watch and you have the phone in the car at some point, when you're in a car crash, it's going to alert the watch first.
It was a little weird to see the word car crash so many times in the keynote. It almost felt like you have to have an Apple device to be safe in the world, but yeah.
And yeah, thank God they're not putting any pressure on me to test it out. So, but the interesting thing is, I think the reason why they made such a big deal of it is because they've actually spent years in developing this tech and doing research behind it. So they claim that they've actually driven the equivalent of 100 million miles in real cars in test conditions. To make sure that the system is fully baked and it works the way it's advertised and the way it's supposed to. So, and when Apple does something this big, it's pretty much guaranteed that they've done their homework. It's not just another gimmick feature, especially when it comes related to health and safety.
So coming back to the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus, the processor is the same as the earlier generation, right? Which is a great processor. There's absolutely no problem with that.
Yeah. I think even the iPhone 12, which had the A14 Bionic chip, I think even that by current Android standards, I think it's pretty much on par with the most powerful current Android chips made by Qualcomm or anybody else. In fact, the A15 already outperformed the fastest Android chips, Qualcomm chips, and the A16 is way beyond that. So I think anybody with any kind of everyday use case scenario will be more than happy with the 14, and which has the A15 chips. Is a bit confusing, 14 with the A15 chip, but I don't think Apple has anyways made a big deal at all. I think throughout its product history on specs, it's never sold
But
products.
that's even
specs.
going back to the Mac, right? They've never fussed upon. You know how PCs would come with a sticker, Intel inside, and MMX or this and that, and Apple was never that.
Yeah, and I mean, for even now, I think the most powerful iPhone as well, the Pro Max, probably runs on 6 GB of RAM.
Yeah.
And that's actually laughable in the face of the modern Android competition, where they've gone up to 32 GBs in some gaming phones, which is more than most laptops that people have nowadays. So it's ridiculous what Android can do, and it's great that they can do that because user has complete control.
Yeah.
But Apple, because they have control over the hardware and the software, they know exactly how much to throttle and how much throttle you need to give the software, and they can control it even with as low as 4 GB.
Yeah. My prediction is that the 14 Plus, I think in India or Asia, is going to do well. I think we like bigger devices.
Correct, yeah.
I was one of those people who said, I'm going to get the 13 mini. Because again, that form factor
it's
stuff.
A sweet spot for me
but
too.
But it's just, I think battery life on that phone was a little crazy.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. The battery life was the only downside to that device. But otherwise, I think in terms of size, performance, camera capabilities, overall, the quickness of the chip itself, it is a sweet spot.
And it's last of that form factor. I think that started in iPhone 4.
If anybody has that, I think they should keep it. Just freeze it somewhere and auction it on eBay after 25 years.
So 14 essentially is pretty much the same as 13 incremental updates. Apart from your satellite SOS, camera update, screen. Is there a screen update?
No, the screen also is similar.
And crash detection, and the satellite and crash detection will work in India whenever approvals happen. From an upgrade standpoint, if you're on an iPhone, let's actually talk about upgrading from Android or Apple either to these devices. What would your suggestion be?
I think if you're using anything prior to the iPhone 12 series, it should be a great upgrade. If you have the 12 and if you're not a power user, I think you can still get away with the 12 as well. It's not a bad phone at all. If you are owner of a 13 device, a 13 generation device, definitely not an upgrade worth it, unless you're a pro level photographer. And even then, we've had some fantastic photographers at the event, who came along with us. Joshua Karthik being one of them, and he was showing me some of the pictures that he had taken from his iPhone 13. Because he reached a few days earlier to San Francisco for the event, and he was just going about taking pictures of the city and the landscape on his 13 Pro. And it's incredible what you can do if you have the skills, So they always say whether it's the tools or whether it's the person behind the camera. And I think it's a mix of both, of course. Yeah. But if you know what you're doing, if you know your frames right, if you know your lighting well, you can even do a fantastic job with and why just an iPhone? You can do a great job with any mid-level Android phone as well. These days, what Androids can do is remarkable as well.
For me, again, Pixel, what Pixel does with. It's what, a 25 grand? No, sub 30,000 rupee device, right? That camera just works amazing. So speaking on cameras, I think then let's just segue into the Pro phones because they get the big camera update, right?
Yeah. The Pro models finally they get a 48 megapixel sensor, which is I think after 6 years of languishing with the 12 MP. I mean, languishing is a strong word, but having pushed the 12 megapixel sensor to its potential limit, Apple thought it's finally time to go to a quad pixel mode, which basically means that 4 pixels are combined into one super pixel, and then you get more light. You just get more light into the sensor. And again, I've not had enough time to test it out, but it's something that Android has been doing for a while. In fact, I remember Nokia has been doing it for almost a decade now, while Nokia was alive.
That 50 megapixel or whatever.
So they had this series called PureView, which was based around its camera prowess. It was sold as a camera phone, and then later it segued into Lumia series, which also had a similar sensor, and it was ahead of its time, I think. But I think what at the core of it, the tech is very similar, but obviously Apple being Apple, and so many years have obviously since elapsed, and computational photography has taken a giant leap forward, especially with what you can do with 16 billion transistors in a small chip. So of course, I mean, with the power of computational, you can take that quad pixel theory, that the pixel binning theory, 4 pixels into one superpixel, to a whole new level. And Apple claims again that it's 65% better in terms of low light captures, which is quite a dramatic term to throw out there. 65% is a pretty big deal because it doesn't have the largest sensor on any smartphone for sure. That would, I think, would go to the Xiaomi 12s Ultra, which has a 1-inch sensor. So even without having the largest sensor, they're still trying to get the most amount of light onto the sensor, and obviously Apple's secret sauce trying to make it better. So that 48 megapixel is actually great for again pro level applications where you can actually capture in 48 megapixel Pro RAW mode, which is Apple's way of calling it a raw image. It's called Pro RAW. And you can crop into the center of the image, which can still give you a full resolution 2x zoom.
2x, yeah.
So you can actually get closer to the subject without losing any detail.
So just to break that down, so the main camera on the 14 Pro and Pro Max is a 48 megapixel sensor. When you take regular pictures from your regular stock camera app and stuff, it outputs a 12 megapixel picture, combining 4 pixels into one.
You do have the option of selecting Pro RAW manually and keeping the 48, retaining the 48 MP.
For the same picture?
For the same picture.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can choose whether you want to capture that image in 12 megapixel resolution or 48 megapixel. So when you choose the Pro RAW mode manually, you have a 65 to 70 MB file, which will give you all the data, which is great for post-processing, playing around in Adobe Lightroom, what have you.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a smaller power user thing, but definitely fun to try out. Again, it blows my mind to have that resolution on a phone in your pocket, right?
Have something like that in your pocket, and in that form factor itself is ridiculous. So I don't know whether it's the best or no, but yes, I'm very eager to try it out.
I think for me the interesting bit was how they've let go of Deep Fusion as their computational photography engine name.
They're not actually let it go yet. It's still there, but I think they're trying to upsell the new photonic engine. Yeah. So Deep Fusion is basically a process which is part of the photonic engine of the ISP now. So Deep Fusion basically meant that it could take multiple images at multiple exposures, stack them up, and then select the best one and just show that one to you as the final output in your photo gallery. So that's still a process, and the process is called Deep Fusion, but the engine that drives it is called photonic engine.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to market now.
So whatever results I saw, I was seeing Verge's review and a bunch of other things. The difference between, again, the camera of 13 Pro and 14 Pro seems pretty similar.
Yeah,
unless you're really pixel peeping, especially on the Instagram size, it may not matter. I think 14 has better bokeh because of a slightly larger sensor that I was seeing. And my personal experience, if you really want to take great pictures on the iPhone 13, at least the 13 Pro, get this app called Halide. Makes so much of a difference for me, at least.
Yeah.
I think Apple just is very aggressive with their processing right now.
Especially in the last few months, right? I think after the last update on the 15 on iOS 15, I think they really amped up the HDR processing, which I think which could go either ways.
Yeah.
For low light photography, it really didn't do much. In fact, it made a lot of pictures look inferior to what they used to before.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that with they fixed a lot of those issues with iOS 16. Like I said, I've just had it for a few hours right now, so I'm really looking forward to going out into the night and getting some of those low light pictures and seeing what has improved. Whether I'm seeing 65% more information, I don't know.
So, what would you suggest? Who would you suggest would be a user for the 14 Pro and Pro Max from our upgrade pipeline?
The amount of people I speak to who are both Apple fanboys or just bling boys, people will buy it regardless. I mean, the amount of people I see carrying a Samsung Fold or a Flip without ever having the need to multitask, or at least need to have 4 windows open at once, which is what the power use case scenario for a Samsung Fold-like device is. It doesn't matter to people. I think people just want to have the latest and greatest, and that's, I think, Apple marketing at its best. It's the whole argument between whether you want it or whether you need it. I don't think any of us needs anything more than an iPhone 12, but we all want it, right? We all want the latest phone out there. We want the latest specs. We want to have the bragging rights. So it really doesn't matter. Like I said, like I've seen great pictures coming out of 12 and 13 Pros, and when they were, the top of the game a couple of years back, people were equally happy with them. No one complained that, it has less detail or less color fidelity. So I think improvements are always going to be there, and people are never going to be satisfied, which is all for the better of it, because that's how you push technology forward. But I don't see it, I don't know how to put it, but I don't think it's only meant for the power user. I mean, if you really are a great photographer, like I said, you can do great things even with a 40-year-old camera.
Yeah.
It's about what you see in the frame.
Yeah. So I'll summarize. For me, I think if you have a 12 or a 13, you're pretty fine, unless you really want
specs. Yeah.
Cool. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about iOS 16, because I think that's a good upgrade, and a lot of people will just find the device very new.
I don't think they'll even feel the need to upgrade to a new device.
Yeah, I think so too.
Hello, everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On a special edition of Cyrus Says, which we're calling Cyrus Drives, Cyrus is joined by Ashay Bhave. He's the founder of a vegan and sustainable sneaker brand called Theli. They drive around the city in a Volvo XC40 Recharge and talk about how brands like Theli and Volvo are shaping a better future for society. Don't forget to check out the video edition of the episode on the Cyrus Says YouTube channel. On a niche thing, Anish welcomes Chef Harsh Kedia. The two of them decode whether products with no added sugar labels available in the market are helpful or harmful. On Advertising is Dead, it's all business. Varun talks to Azan Firoz Seth, founder and chief happiness officer at The Hub, Bengaluru. The duo discuss the booming creator economy and how an offline space adds to an online activity's reach and connection. On Credit Smart with Sibyl, Anupam and Sujata bust some more myths around the Sibyl score, credit cards, EMIs, and more. And on Varta Lab, Akash and Naveen are joined by stand-up comedian Sejal Bhatt. They share stories about rats, hometowns, and female professions. Once again, I would like to remind you all about our merch store. Go and check it out on the website ivmpodcast.com. There's a link for shop. Click on that and it'll take you to our store. Also, do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please do spread the word about the show. That really does help us. It helps all kinds of podcasts. And do remember to rate us or review us wherever you're listening to us or watching us. That could also be on YouTube. Remember, we have a number of channels on YouTube where you can go and check out our shows. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: Volvo XC40 Recharge, Heads Up for Tails, HDFC Mutual Fund, and TransUnion Civil. Thank you so much for making this possible.
We're back with Nishant speaking about the new Apple launches, and iOS 16 is a big one.
It's a big one. I think if you go to the press release, they claim to have more than 165 improvements, changes, highlights. So it's quite an extensive update, and I think the best they've had in years, because it changes the look of your phone completely. I mean, you can actually just use your iPhone 12 for another couple of years more and still feel fresh, because it is a whole new refresh. I mean, you can do, for the first time ever, you can have customizable lock screens.
First time, that's so funny, right?
Yeah. Any Android fanboy must be like really laughing and smirking right now listening to this. But I think, again, it's a case of Apple being late to the party, but even when they're late to the party, they are the best dressed.
Yeah.
So in this case also, I think the way they've actually approached the whole angle of customization is so well sorted. It's so classy, refined, easy. As well. And for me, I think my personal favorite feature of iOS 16, apart from the lock screens, is that you can link a particular lock screen to a focus
mode.
Yeah. So you can just swipe to go to sleep mode, to do not disturb, to driving mode. You don't have to actually go and toggle around the control center and find what you're looking for. And it gives a very personal feeling as well. And they've done it so well because, again, it's typical Apple attention to detail. So even when you have a human image as the wallpaper, and when the screen dims, because now in the Pro phones you have the always on display, which means that you always have the display on, showing you vital information like time, widgets, so on. It also preserves the natural skin tone of the person whose image is as the wallpaper. So even though it dims down the display down to 1 Hz for the tech geeks out there, so it's really, really low power. It's very efficient. It doesn't take up battery at all. But even then, it still shows you the natural colors of the skin, of the clothes. So it's, again, one of those small things which even you only appreciate once you speak to the engineers out there and they point it out, because otherwise it's just a slightly dimmer screen. But when you actually notice it, when the engineer speaks about it, you go, this wasn't required, but you did it.
Yeah. So I've been on the iOS 16 beta since the public beta went live. To me, it was like, wait, did Apple just allow so much customization? Because you don't expect that. right?
It's so unlike Apple.
It's on like, but they did it with the Apple Watch, and I was like, feels like it's almost the same team that they got and said, can you work on this? Because a lot of things, some of the fonts look kind of similar and stuff. But what you were saying about the human thing, right? But if you have your clock or your time, and if you have a portrait thing, it even like puts the
it
text
shows you
behind
the depth effect.
behind the person. So a lot of small touches. I think even if you have a landscape, like I was playing around and for one of the wallpapers I had a Swami bottle, and it fades in from one, like it recognizes that it's a bottle, and it fades the rest first and the main part later. So small tweaks here and there.
The transitions are really well done. Again, it's typical Apple to be very finicky about how the transitions happen, the graphics, the animation quality, the smoothness of the animation. So you can complain that it's probably 5 years too late or maybe 6 years too late compared to an Android phone. But like I said, they did it properly.
It's the best It's the best implementation of a lock screen I've seen. And just you can have multiple, and maybe we'll take 2 minutes to talk about focus modes, because I think that's a very underutilized aspect of iOS.
It is, and I think it's very important, especially when you're driving, and even more importantly when you have an Apple Watch on your wrist. And it happens to me as well. I've been using the Apple Watch since 7 years, and now it's become second nature to just keep looking at your wrist every time it sends you a haptic feedback, because that something is buzzing. So first of all, I think it's also a matter of having social awareness and social etiquette, because still a lot of people who I hang out with they take offense every time I look at my watch, because they just assume that I'm getting late and I'm looking at my watch, which is not the case. I'm just looking at what notification has buzzed. So again, I think it's a two-way street. The other important thing I was getting at is while driving, and when you get a buzz on your wrist, it's very natural and human to flick your wrist and look at the watch, even though for a fleeting second, which could become a very crucial second. So I think to have focus mode so easily accessible is great, because you can just with just one swipe of the finger, you can go into driving mode, which can just completely disable all sorts of notifications to bother you and distract you from driving.
So you can also set up a office focus mode, where you could have your Slack and everything just show up on your lock screen, and you switch it to another mode and it's all gone.
Yeah.
Different wallpaper, different look and feel.
So you can actually have, you can maintain work-life balance if you really know how to set it up and you want to set it up. A lot of us, I think a lot of us don't bother, because we want at some level to be inundated with messages and notifications, because we become slaves to our devices, right? All of us. Unless you are very self-conscious about, taking screen time out of your daily routine, it's very difficult to do. But this helps. At least it gives you a gentle nudge that, you can do it.
I actually use it for, again, photography and for video. So I have one focus mode called shooting, and that disables mostly everything, and I just get my camera apps and my editing apps on my main screen.
That's a great use case scenario.
And that works really, really well, because D&D comes on, so nothing's getting interrupted.
Yeah, exactly. So I think everybody has to just find their rhythm and find their workflow. And if you can do it, like I said, it's a bit of work, because you have to go through a barrage of different settings for different apps. You spend 15 minutes doing that, and you can really have a great work-life balance.
What about the dynamic island, which seems to be the biggest talk?
Yeah, there was a gentle, I think, breakout of a laughter as well on stage when they announced dynamic island, because people thought it's a joke. Is that the real name? And obviously it sunk in after a few seconds, and that you can't change that. It's here to stay. But again, I think marketing term aside, it's a great implementation of a sore point. For the longest of time, the notch was, I think, was the biggest sore point for everybody who wanted an iPhone. Everything's great about the iPhone, fine and dandy, but what about that ugly notch? So they finally got rid of that ugly notch, and not just got rid of it, but they just made it more useful, which I think is, again, harking back to Steve Jobs' days of making, technology more human, and the way that you can interact with it. So when you listen to music and you have to swipe up the screen, the dynamic island becomes contextual. So you can actually tap on it and it can expand your music controls. Timer, similarly, if you have a timer open, it becomes, it gives you a glance instantly at all times on top of the home screen about, how far you are in your timer. So things like that, and of course it's going to be made open to third-party APIs as well. So we'll have more use case scenarios for that as well. I think it's a complete 180-degree turn from what was the ugly duckling into something that's become so handsome suddenly.
It's a marketing feature now.
Yeah, it's a desirable feature from something that was a sore point. So I think hats off to Apple for pulling that one off.
I also think iOS 16, that whole live notification, think that's a great thing to happen. So if you have your Uber or you have your scores, they're dynamically on the
Yeah, so you can track
street.
your ride and how far it's reached even
Yeah.
without unlocking your phone. So
Yeah.
it's going to come, I think, in due course. But eventually, when it does, I think it's going to become a very active lock screen as well.
And that these also can go on the dynamic island. From what I was seeing, they'll allow the APIs to use that also.
Depends how they use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, speaking of that, I just realized because I've only had this for, like I said, a day, and the always on display for me has until now proved to be quite distracting because probably I'm not used to it. I don't think any of us who are iPhone users are used to the screen being on all the time. So when it's on your desk and you're working on your laptop or your computer, you just keep looking at it, you're just giving it the side eye all the time. Like, is that notification? Because you're not used to, your mind is still computing whether this phone is unlocked.
Yeah,
Or
interesting.
and the notifications are slightly brighter than the rest of the screen, as people, if watching it on YouTube, can see. So it's a bit of a it takes getting used to. So like the rest of the screen is slightly more
I can
dimmer,
see it.
but
Yeah.
but you have slightly
Yeah.
brighter notifications. So you
Yeah.
just feel like you should
You should read
address
it,
that.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually keep most of those off, and I think now you have an option where it just gives you the count.
Yeah,
of how
you
many
can do the count. You can do
notifications,
you can do a stack, or you can do
Yeah.
a list. So there are different
Yeah.
options.
So I keep it on count. I'll see when I scroll up and see. For me, a very small a small feature, but I think a very big update is the haptic keyboard.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've tried that out.
I just tried it this morning. In fact, yeah.
I can't go back now.
You can't go back. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And again, Android phones, I've had it for the longest of time, and I always felt that the Android typing experience was slightly better.
Yeah.
Even though the keyboard is more comfortable on the iOS, but now I know why. I think it's just the lack of haptic until now. So I think, again, completely agree with you. Small feature, but a big change in the way you
Yeah.
interact with the phone.
So I've been using that for a couple of months. So basically now when you type on the iPhone and if you enable it, it gives you that haptic feedback. And I also think Apple does have the best haptic motors of.
Yes, they are very
Any
intuitive.
phones.
Yeah.
So now that I've been used to it for like 2 months, I switched it off the other day and I was like, this feels
You
weird.
can't go back.
You can't
Yeah.
go back.
That's true.
Small thing, but really, really nice. Some other updates are edit text. I don't know how many people use iMessage. I don't.
I think again it's for predominantly for the
US market.
this is predominantly for the US market because again in the US I think it's almost looked down upon if you get a message in green bubbles
Yeah.
as opposed to the blue bubbles. So because then you're outed, so to speak. You're not an iOS user. So I think again it's big in the US and it works for them. For us, because we are predominantly a WhatsApp using country or now moving on to Telegram and other platforms, it's not a game changer, but it's good to have. I mean, it's better late than never.
Let's quickly touch upon AirPods Pro. I think that's something which is not in the news that much, but it seems like a pretty big upgrade.
It's a big upgrade because again it doesn't look very different than the last generation AirPods Pro, and which is why I think it's not getting the screen time or the web time as it should. But again, I spend a lot of time with the engineers, one-on-one, speaking about the innards of the AirPods Pro. And again, after having spent some time with them, I was blown away by the engineering because they've really gone under the hood and re-engineered the entire thing from scratch. So you have, if you wear an Apple Watch, you also get an SPL meter complication in that, which shows you in dBs the noise around you. And the moment you put the AirPods, the new AirPods Pro in, they have the new chip called H2, which interacts with your watch and tells you exactly how much ambient noise it's cutting out and attenuating.
Oh, nice.
And it was cutting down by 26 dB the ambient noise, which is as good as being outside of the studio and inside a studio like this, which is completely soundproof. So 25 dB is huge. It can really work well for flying in aircrafts, walking out on the streets, commuting. So, and especially for a form factor like that, I mean, I would have understood that it wouldn't have been such a big thing if it was over-ear headphones, which they have the AirPods Max for that. But for something this small, it's incredible. And the other thing that they've worked very hard on, and something that has not been spoken about, is the transparency mode. So, in fact, Sony just launched their new in-ear buds called Link Buds. Basically, they are just supposed to be worn all day without you ever having to take them off.
The round ones.
Yeah. They look like little earrings inside your ears. So the whole idea is that you don't have to take your in-ear earbuds off when you're having a conversation with someone, because they feel natural. You can listen to music as well as have conversations. So what Apple has done is they've given a similar feature to the new AirPods Pro in the transparency mode. It was there before. What they've really worked hard on is making it more natural. So the timbre of the voice, of the person you are talking to and your own voice, because sometimes it happens that when you have something in your ears, like the in-ear buds, your voice to you sounds different because obviously it's again slightly muffled, it's attenuated, it sounds different because it's coming through microphones. They've got rid of all that. It sounds as good as not wearing anything at all. So for me, that was a huge leap forward because that makes a difference between you wearing the AirPods all day or not. And they are so comfortable now because you have smaller ear tips as well, and it has twice as powerful active noise cancellation as before. So it's really packed in a lot of good tech, which strangely hasn't been spoken about.
Yeah, and small thing because I've lost 2 AirPod Pros. There's a lanyard. There's a lanyard thing finally. You can.
Yeah, that's true. But I think in your case, it could be probably after a few drinks.
No, there was no drinks. I once lost them in the gym, so there was definitely no drinks. Let's quickly touch upon the Apple Watch.
The Apple Watch Ultra. Well, the Apple Watch Series 8 is basically just a Series 7S, if you ask me. I mean, again, the only new thing in that is the temperature sensor, which is great for women's health.
Yeah.
If you want to track your ovulation periods and so on. And apart from that, it also gets the new the crash detection and emergency SOS. But in terms of design, it looks identical to the Series 7. In terms of all the other features, it's again identical. The good thing is that the new watch range, whether it's the Watch 8, the Watch SE or the Watch Ultra, they all get the same chip now, the S8 chip. So even if you buy the SE, which I think in fact is a great entry point for children to get into, I mean, not because they need an Apple Watch, but if as a helicopter parent,
Yeah.
if you want to be in touch with your kids all the time without having them exposed to a full-fledged phone, you can actually link a Watch SE, which is the cheapest Apple Watch, to your own phone as the parent's phone, and you can just monitor your kids and you can communicate with them on a one-on-one basis via voice dictation, or even the Apple Watch has a keyboard now. So I think that's a great feature, the family setup as they call it. So I think that's again something that is possible even with the cheapest watch, and it's great for children to have if you want to enable your children to be in touch. And the Watch Ultra, I think that's the real big game changer, because now I think they're taking the fight right up to Garmin's doorstep.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though they claim the battery life to be 36 hours right now to start with, and eventually I think in a few months down the line they're going to have a low power mode which will extend the battery life to 60 hours. It's still not in the same ballpark as Garmin, because Garmin just goes on for weeks. I think they, if not weeks, at least many, many hours. I think it's through 2 or 3 times that of the Apple Watch Ultra as well. But again, I think it's just the quality of the sensors, the quality of the experience, the amount of things that you can do, even just as a regular watch. Like even for me, the use case scenarios are so myriad of, during the entire day, I could use it as a remote for my Apple TV. So when I'm having lunch or dinner and the TV's on, I don't want to, pick up the Apple remote, I can just flick my wrist and, use that as a trackpad. It's great for having controls for music on your wrist at all times. I mean, when I'm driving, I use it for, replying to voice texts, just by dictating to it. So there are tons of things that you can do with the Apple Watch, which the Garmin can't do. Again, in terms of the real exploratory features, they've really gone the whole hog, and, they have new straps as well, which are designed to take the beating, whether you're 100 meters underwater or maybe 10,000 feet up in the sky. So I think, again, they've done a good job in making it look rugged, because industrial design wise as well, I think it's really something that you would, it's desirable. I mean, it might be too big for most wrists, because I tried it on at the event, and the 49mm...
49mm is a big size.
It's a big size. I mean, the Garmin Phoenix, though, even has a bigger size, 51mm. So they have 3 sizes in Garmin, depending on your wrist. The Apple Watch Ultra only comes in 49. It's going to be too big for most people, but again, it's designed to be worn on adventure gear, so maybe over a jacket, maybe over scuba diving gear. So which is why the screen is big and the touch points have to be big, because usually, again, the use case scenario could be that you're wearing gloves, whether you're mountaineering, whether you're scuba diving, whatever it is. So it's designed with intent, it's designed with purpose. So again, like we were chatting earlier about, who is it for? It might be for the serious, expeditionist. But eventually I see everybody buying it because people just want the biggest and the latest and the best.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter.
It's going to be funny to see people wear it as a regular watch.
It is. And I'm sure it's going to happen because, like I said, people just want to be seen with the latest and greatest. So regardless of who it was designed for, it's going to still sell big.
But I didn't know about this whole AirPods Pro 2 and watch, that complication. to see how much
Well,
noise
in
reduction.
fact, you have that complication even right now. Only thing is with the new AirPods Pro, because of the new chip, you get a real-time measurement of what you're listening in your ear.
Yeah.
So it actually monitors the ambient noise that you're hearing in your ears. Right now, what you can do is you can just use the SPL meter and monitor the ambient noise levels.
Yeah.
So, which is the difference between the AirPods Pro and the current complication on the watch.
I still use from time to time my Apple Watch 2.
Yeah, it still works.
Still works.
Wow.
I use it for heart rate monitoring, so it still works well. Cool. Quickly want to touch upon pricing of the iPhones. So the 14s have been at the same price, but the Pros have gone up by 10,000.
Yeah, the Pros are more expensive because again they have new hardware. They have the taxes have gone up as well.
Yeah.
I think with Apple, the Apple's pricing in India has always been on the safer side. So they just want to be cautionary as opposed to being forecasting. So they don't want to save a price increase for 6 months down the line. So they set one price and they stick to it for the entire year until the next generation comes out. So you'll very rarely see a change in Apple pricing. If it happens at the dealer level, be it the Reliance or the Imagine or the Maples. But from Apple side, they keep standard pricing for as long as the generation survives.
I was also looking at the stats. So the iPhone 14 Pro now starts at 1,29,900. Man, that is.
You don't even want to claim the price for the 1 TB.
What is the 1 TB price?
I think close to 2 lakhs, 189,900.
Damn. I want to get one of the American YouTubers on the show and do a India versus US price comparison of all Apple products. But on the iPhone 14, which is for 1.3 lakhs basically, there's 40,000 of duties and taxes.
It is frankly ridiculous, but it is what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
we can't change the system. And I think there's been a lot of speculation about, whether the US made and iPhone sold only in US will work in India, because so the iPhone sold in the US now from the 14 series onwards will only have an eSIM. So they don't have a physical SIM tray anymore. So there was a lot of speculation about whether they will work if you buy an iPhone in the US. And technically it should. There's no reason, because Jio, Vodafone both offer eSIM plans. So it should. I mean, unless and until, there is again government clamp down on doing things like that, which restricts imports and, grey market profiteering. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't work. So if you want to save a big lump of cash, I think it's still going to be the route that most people take. Ask their relatives in Toronto or New Jersey.
No, book a flight to Singapore.
That'd be cheaper as well.
Do a couple of days.
You can throw in a
Singapore and
vacation
come
as
back.
well.
Exactly. Cool. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Nishant.
Thank you, Anish. So the 14, of course, has a new 14 Plus, which is a much larger size, the 6.7 inch. And although the displays on the face of it look very similar on both the 14 Plus and even the 14 Pro Max, there is a slight difference in terms of brightness and peak HDR. So the Pro will actually do 2000 nits in outdoor situations during HDR, because it's also one of the only phones in the world that actually records with a complete Dolby Vision throughput. From the moment you record to processing and even output, it's all in Dolby Vision. So the 2000 nits is actually great for outdoor use and even maintaining that high level of brightness and contrast throughout your editing process. One of the other features that I've realized, I think I've just used it for a very few number of hours now, but what really stood out for me is action mode. And Apple has always been the king of video recording, right? I mean, iPhones have always been the best of the breed when it comes to video recording and video stabilization. And with the action mode, which actually uses the second generation of the sensor shift stabilization, I think Apple has really moved the goalpost a lot further for the competition to catch up on. And it really is like a replacement for a regular gimbal, because I was just actually on my way here and I was doing some test shots and recording samples. And even with the lunar surface quality of our roads outside, it's no sea of tranquility, right? And the video output was just completely leveled out. I mean, it didn't even feel like I was going through potholes and speed breakers. So that's commendable. Although the resolution is not 4K, you get 2.8K. I think it's still good enough, because you do get this amazing level of stabilization that's been I think it's never been seen before on a smartphone. So that's again going to be a game changer.